Dr. Katherine Hacker lined up for the last session for the forenoon. She's a professor in the Department of Art History, Visual Art and Theory, the University of British Columbia of Canada. The title is From Kondagaon to Delhi and to the UK, Revisiting Brass Casting in Bastar. We have a lot of Bastar sculptures, tiny ones in our craft shop. They are in high demand in South India because we don't have such a craft made here. So we have continuous flow of these Bastar tribal craft even in Dakshin Chitra.
In 2016, Bhupendra Baghel of Kondagaon was commissioned to create 2 works for Another India, Explorations and Expressions of Indigenous South Asia, an exhibition at the University of Cambridge's Museum of Archaeology and Anthropology. This commission marks the most recent accolade for Bastar's most celebrated casting family. Bhupendra is eldest son of the late Jaidev Baghel, who distinguished himself from the many other casters with his innovative narratives of local themes and with his turn to the Sierre Perdue technique, thereby enabling him to produce monumentally scaled sculptures. While Bhupen's life-sized Adivasi Mata draws on the familiar visual repertoire of mother and child, next please, the second sculpture, titled Colonial Encounter, was inspired by a colonial period photograph and occupies pride of place on the cover of the exhibition catalog. The photograph, dated December 1935, shows Edgar Hyde, administrator of Bastar State from 1934 to 40, next to a young, gaunt woman. On the reverse is a caption, Edgar Hyde showing picture of Aboriginal girls to an Aboriginal girl, but she is too shy to look. The enigmatic image suggests the complex power relationship between this colonial officer and the local Bastar communities, particularly Adivasi women, over whom he had jurisdiction and responsibility. Working from this photograph, Bhupendra Baghel stands as a contemporary artist commenting on a range of politically fraught issues emerging from his personal history. Next, please. Rajendra Baghel, Jaidev's nephew, was also featured in this same exhibition. Next, please. Rajendra also runs the successful shop Jitku Mitki, taking its name from the popular deified couple worshipped across Bastar and neighboring Orissa. Jitku's axe and Mitki's basket and iron rod or digging stick speak specifically of labor and the laboring body by which Bastar's vast natural resources, land, dense tropical teak forest, and waterways are harnessed through meaningful production. Even today, the main form of livelihood remains small-scale agriculture. Furthermore, these iron tools crafted by the local lohar serve as potent, fraught reminder of Bastar's rich mineral resources, especially iron ore, tin, limestone, and sulfur, which are being exploited by the state. With the exhibition Unknown India as a point of departure, my paper explores the uneven and changing networks of circulation for the next generation of craftspeople in Bastar, Chhattisgarh. Next, please. As background, I first met Jaidev Baghel and Manik Gadwa in Delhi in 1989. Jaidev had an exhibition come sale at one of the hotels, and Manik was participating in the crafts demonstration program at the Crafts Museum, alerting me early on to the different possibilities for marketing their work. At their invitation, I traveled to Bastar the following year. Since that inaugural visit, I have made regular trips to Bastar, the one of earlier this week being most recent. This seminar provides an opportunity to reflect on the state of this particular craft over a 30-year period. In preparation for our seminar, I revisited my earlier paper in which I identified Bastar metal casting as a specific craft in transition. As I wrote, the artist must aggressively define or negotiate a space for himself in a shifting and unstable context by reaching out to new marketing opportunities. This expanding marketplace speaks of the present economics of crafts and of the changing roles that tradition, innovation, and ideology play in the production of meanings. Fieldwork from the 1990s underscored that the demand for ritually prescribed images was diminishing within their traditional communities as socio-religious practices contract or transform amidst conflicting attitudes. My paper is interested in the ways the future of the craft is being navigated by the craftspeople themselves and repositioned by players in private and public organizations. Traditional Indian crafts was an important category in colonial India, as Susan was just discussing, and remains so today, but interest in crafts are varied and even contradictory. The craft sector in general is important for its income generation potential, especially in rural India, accounting for between 3 and 6% of employment and GDP in the 1990s. Both state and non-state actors see craft development as a way to increase rural employment in the non-formal sectors, thereby stemming the tide of rural-urban migration. Martan Singh, well known for his work with textile revival and intact, used the phrase perennial potential, which aptly describes crafts development in India and captures the frustration of those who work in related areas. The potential is and always has been enormous. Handicrafts emerged as a major export from India in the 1980s. From 1993 to 2000, the scale of handicrafts and handloom exports increased from approximately 30 billion rupees to 100 billion. In spite of this performance in the world market and the vast resources that have been devoted to handicraft development, the potential remains only partially tapped. As Liebel and Roy note, the millions of artists who produce these goods still struggle with the very basics of existence. In significant ways, the national assessment, briefly rehearsed above, reflects the situation on the ground in Bastar. And for the many communities of brasscasters distributed across both urban and rural areas, practicing their traditional livelihood remains extremely difficult. Masuram Sononi, one of the 20 casting families in Barkai village, told me a decade ago that had he not owned a small plot of agricultural land, his family would not have survived from casting alone. Bhupen echoed the same sentiment. The last few years have been very difficult for the Gadwa community in Kondagaon, forcing some to leave in search of more steady income, such as house building and masonry. The cost of materials has also risen. Wood for firing and wax for wrapping the clay cores used to be readily available local resources, and scrap metal has to be purchased in Raipur, 200 kilometers away. Yet another pattern has emerged that seems to sustain many craftspeople. They continue to prepare and sell mostly traditional work in local weekly haats and annual marais. At Tokopal Hut, 20 craftspeople sat with a range of objects associated with these melas. Next, please. Kalash placed on top of lat for processions, tori or brass horns, small images of mata, and brass bells, often worn by Siraha. All these gadwats are from nearby Arakot village. Next, please. And regularly travel to 4 or 5 of these lively and well-attended weekly markets. Alongside this routine, they also prepare orders for businessmen who in turn sell their works nationally. One independent businessman dominates the trade. Anil Lunkar established his shop, Sanskriti, in Jagdalpur in 2001. The objects Erakote casters prepare for Lunkar are deer and elephants, but also small busts of tribal women or mother and child. Next, please. Unlike the limited circulation of works by casters such as Manik Gadwa, himself a winner of the National Craftsman Award in 1969, and whose Jagdalpur family is profiled in Ruth Reeves' 1962 Sierra Perdue casting in India, Jaidev Baghel's work is in the permanent collections of Delhi's Crafts Museum and the National Museum, and Bhopal's Bharat Bhavan. Next, please. The Bharat Bhavan was inaugurated by Prime Minister Indira Gandhi in 1982 as a multi-arts complex with a Rupankar Museum of Fine Arts, twin wings devoted to contemporary urban art and to folk and Adivasi art of Madhya Pradesh, India's state with the largest Adivasi population. This purpose-built museum, intimately linked with the vision of its founding director, J. Swaminathan, acknowledges individual creativity and strategically positions Adivasi work as art. As Ghulam Muhammad Sheikh noted in an essay on the extraordinarily talented Pardangan painter Jangar Singh Sham, quote, opting for change is indeed a willed act of transgression towards upward social and economic mobility that the status of artist would provide, unquote. Kondagaon caster Sukchand's brass torso with surface patterning of uniformly thin vertical lines created by the distinctive Mom Sutta, this wax thread technique, was featured on the front cover of the Bharat Bhavan catalog. And of course you see Indira Gandhi holding that catalog. Thus we see that there has been recognition of this wax thread work and individuals in the museum world for over 30 years, thereby placing Bhupen Baghel's 2016 Museum Commission more fully in perspective. Jaidev's remarkable career was punctuated by government awards, beginning with the National Award for Master Craftsman in 1977, followed in rapid succession by other honors and exhibition opportunities. Notably, he was among the first recipients of the Shilp Guru, a prestigious national award established in 2003. The award has particular eligibility requirements. One must be a previous winner of either a national or a state award and over the age of 55. The guidelines also stipulate that the person is a hereditary master who has contributed to the welfare and development of crafts, of the crafts community and the crafts sector as a whole. By Jaidev's own estimation, he has trained approximately 300 people at his workshop in Kondagaon, challenging the normative notion of a hereditary occupational group. Next. Baghel's mid-career monumental sculptures of tribal women show them in attitudes of work. One sits and will hold a basket, another winnows. They combine a full rendering of the face with the elongated, flattened torso of his earlier works. Ornaments are rendered in careful, almost ethnographic detail. Each sculpture now bears a date and Jaidev's signature visible on the back. Next, please. Today, there is intense competition from NGOs and private shops in Kondagaon, Raipur, and beyond to capitalize on this particular vision. In fact, such products are now made across the country and marketed under the capacious category of tribal art. Has India's 2003 implementation of geographical indicators or indications or GIs been a useful initiative to check or arrest the wholesale duplication of regionally specific designs and iconography as well as distinctive techniques? The protection of GIs is an important intellectual property right and ostensibly a legal and economic tool for the development of rural areas and the preservation of cultural heritage. A GI is used to identify products with specific characteristics which respond to a specific geographical area. 3 crafts from Bastar have GI designation: Dokra, this metalwork, iron craft, and wooden craft. Has the GI designation proven beneficial to the craftspeople and the crafts it recognizes? I'd be interested in hearing from our panel and others about the potential benefits or shortcomings of this type of branding. Jaidev's depiction of tribal women can be read also as a very self-conscious decision to claim an Adivasi identity. The Gadwa is a contested category, and so is Baghel insisting on representing tribal types to claim agency and even to wrest representational authority from the bloated, promiscuous tribal art market. Roughly 8% of India's population, some 85 million people, is officially classified as scheduled tribes, a feature of India's constitution of 1950. The terms tribe and Adivasi are used almost interchangeably today, but they are not coeval. They signal different coordinates in an increasingly politicized field. Adivasi has been used since the 1950s, when it was introduced by political activists in the Chota Nagpur area, in a bid for a separate Jharkhand state, only realized in 2000, and to mobilize a group identity. Susanna Deval argues that the tribal construct in India is a colonial category, and that it formed part of the colonial legitimizing ideology. She concluded that the tribal paradigm is ill-suited to categorize past and present Adivasi societies. Today, the pressing issues of discrimination and exploitation have been even more complex, especially in Bastar. As Amita Bhaviskar writes, quote, "The landscape that Adivasis inhabit has been the internal frontier for an expanding Indian economy, a source of minerals and timber, a site for mines, dams, and heavy industries, and they have witnessed the resultant erosion of their agriculture and forest-based economy." I'd like to quickly and briefly profile 2 local initiatives in order to consider the ways in which craft production in Bastar has been maintained, mediated, or challenged. In his efforts to revitalize regional crafts, Jaidev founded, along with Sonodar Vishwakarma and Harihara Vaishnav, the Paramparik Bastar Shilpi Parivar. This cooperative brought together not only brass casters, but painters, ironsmiths, potters, wood and stone carvers. In many ways, a visionary institute, Shilpigram was conceived as a crafts community with residential spaces for craftspeople and visiting artists, and spaces dedicated to meeting and exhibiting. This issue of agency and the promotion of a Bastari identity extended to the organization itself, in that the Shilpi Parivar encouraged craftspeople to participate directly in marketing and exhibiting in order to eliminate middlemen. All craftsmen aspire to be middlemen, claims Rajiv Sethi, an internationally recognized designer and curator. Sethi continues, Jaidev Baghel is the epitome of the sort of casualties that befall master craftsmen. Baghel is competent, a leader among men, and has done much to bring Dokra out in the fore, but several dubious influences have been creeping into the craft, such as government handicraft organizations asking for endless replicas of gods and goddesses, ashtrays, and boxes. Next, please. Let's now turn to a government organization. The Chhattisgarh Hasta Shilpa works with craftspeople from a number of villages around Jagdalpur, including Arakot, Chilkuti, Sirmur, Karanpur, and Kondagaon. At the time of orders, a 50% advance is given. The remaining 50% is paid on completion. Next, please. As you can see, there are indeed endless replicas of gods and goddesses, miniature and life-size images of tribal couples, and bison horn dancers. Many of the new designs have been initiated in Kondagaon. The addition of color, next please, and animated dancers, very much in contrast with the strict frontality of earlier images. We might further complicate this by addressing the issue of training, professional training versus traditional training. Sati, a voluntary organization founded in 1989 and run by a group of ceramic professionals, is based in Kondagaon's Kumarpara, where there are about 150 families practicing terracotta, ironwork, and metal. Quote, "We are helping traditional talent bring these products to the modern marketplace with innovative designs," quote, founder Bhupesh Tiwari stated. One example of a significant intervention in this area is the area of terracotta. Tiwari brought potters from Bengal who introduced the Bankura style that we see on elephants and horses, and they introduced this to the Bastar potters. Sati's mandate is to impart technical and marketing skills to artisans across Bastar, and by their estimate, they have worked with some 1,400 families in 90 villages. The organization employs various strategies, setting up self-help groups, conducting workshops, offering training in bookkeeping and marketing, and organizing exhibitions to help artists market their work. The Council of People's Action and Rural Technology and the Handicraft Development Commission initiated an integrated program called Ambedkar Hastashilpa Vikas Yojana to promote tribal art in this region, but it has not been successful. Despite Sati's initiatives, it reports a decline in children continuing with their traditional crafts, and families cited factors such as fluctuating demand and uncertainty in receipt of orders, lack of marketing expertise, exploitation by middlemen, and decrease in revenues and margins from crafts. From this overview, one could argue that the casting tradition in Bastar remains somewhat robust, but there are troubling aspects of these developments as well, in that the craftspeople have become laborers, replicating the same object type per the demands of a large order. Designers have been introduced, which further alienates craftspeople from their work. This also begs the question about indigenous knowledge. Does it reside in the regional skill, the distinctive momsuta, or wax thread technique? Yet the handmadeness of some projects is giving way to more and more mechanized elements, including polishing. This returns me to my earlier query about how and if the GI designation is benefiting the craftspeople. Another troubling issue is the representational emphasis on the Adivasi body and the normalization, indeed the romanticization, of the Adivasi in a bucolic landscape, which erases all of the conflicts and exploitations noted above. Next, please. Craft is not a fixed, static tradition, but a cultural and social practice that can be amended, transformed, and reconstituted. But at what cost? Thank you.
I'm glad to see that we also have the GI for the basketry of Chettinad. I applied and tried to get it because I thought we should do it and not lose that opportunity. But it hasn't helped us in any way, which is what I wanted to know.
Good, thank you. I mean, that's especially why I brought it up, because I have an incomplete understanding of how this is working, and it's only 10 years or 15 years in place, right?
No, I don't understand it either, so if I know how I can use it
Yes.
to help us, I will be happy.
Can I just add to this whole GI debate? Well, it came into India in 2003, and by the time the Act came about, so it has been around now for 12 or 13 years. Now, interesting thing is that it should be helping because it is a great economic tool, but there is a problem, and I want to explain it as to why it isn't helping. There are two parts to the GI. At the end of the day, it's an act and it's a law. So it is a legal instrument and you have to follow the legalities to make it work for you. The first part, which has been encouraged by the government, is that first establish that you have this product that can claim its rooting in a particular soil. So it does not apply to a design or a pattern. It just associates a craft or a textile practice to a particular geographic area. That is it. Not to hereditary, not to anything. If Jaydev Hacker, if he was still alive and he was to move to New Delhi, he could not claim the craft as his own. Whereas somebody like me could go and settle there and say that I am producing this art and craft. So it is located within a geographical area. Now that is part one of the Act. Once you have registered yourself, nobody in India, believe it or not, has yet gone on to the part B of the Act. And that is that you set up a certification unit. So if you don't have a certification unit, how do you move to branding? How do you move to suing people who are faking and imitating your product? So you have to have a body and you have to certify. Because at the end of the day, the law also states that you can be imprisoned for 6 months if you fake a GI product.
And the certificate only lasts for 10 years, doesn't it?
No, that's a GI certificate. Within the village or
Yes,
the area,
there
there must be a certification body that stamps and says, this product has followed what has been put down in the GI application. But the GI is for 10 years, but every one that was set up in 2003 has actually been renewed. So it's actually in perpetuity almost.
As I understand also for the GI, you've got a national geographic indicator for your basket. But you then, once you have your certification unit, you need to also register in other countries your product. Because otherwise, me in Malaysia, I can copy your product and you can sue me. So there has to be that kind of international registration with other countries who has adopted the GI program or adopted the law. So it's quite complicated. It's not as easy as just one stop.
These were actually in Kashmir for the Pashmina. And very few people have actually gone up, very few craftspeople have gone up and said, please certify me, because there is always a little bit going on. So you can't really go.
And of course, it's important, I think, to note that this is not just about crafts, because it was Darjeeling tea received the very first one. Right?
Started as certification by FAO. It's still being administered by the Food and Agriculture Organization of UN. So it then extended to crafts because there was no other program that people could subscribe to registered crafts. So they decided to also adopt this.
Please ask here another question. See, when you now, if you are looking at developing your design, wondering that you get influenced by whatever you see, wherever it may be, when you are doing that. You are the designer or designing for something. Now, how can you stop your mind from taking things from anywhere? Because there is no original design. Everyone is influenced by design everywhere. So then what happens if I see a basket, say in Malaysia, and I get influenced by that? And I do make a basket which looks similar, but with our own technique, of course. But then can someone sue me, or can I sue someone for that? Oh, thank you.
There was another question.
I'd like to share two observations regarding GI. Number one, sorry to just harp on the same topic.
I've opened up
time.
something that perhaps will continue over this afternoon and tomorrow as well.
It's just that to file the GI, you need to go through a lawyer. So in the people who are actually filing for GI are dependent on the lawyer, and you need to produce documentation that explains the craft and the history and traditionality. That I find is not always accurate in the GI journals once they are published. That is for a fact. And most of the data that's taken is from earlier sources. For example, on the Kanjivaram sari, the information comes from 1961 census. So it is not, and it's not really very accurate, doesn't accurately denote what the tradition is. Number two, personally speaking, when I was doing my research on the Kanjivaram tradition, in 2010, when I submitted my doctoral thesis, that was a time when a lot of stores in Chennai were promoting saris woven in other centers such as Arani and other places as Kanjivaram saris. And there was a lot of marketing of saris woven in other places as Kanjivaram silks. However, that was a time when there were articles that came out in the press saying that legal action would be taken on anybody who would market a sari made in any other place. And I did notice that almost as soon as this announcement came out in the press, that the promotion of saris as being made in Kanjivaram actually stopped. And I really haven't seen, because I've been following up on this, I really haven't seen ads promoting saris made in other places as Kanjivaram saris. So something has actually happened in this particular instance. Thank you.
So there is no getting away from that. And you have to also quote old documents because you have to prove that your craft was in this geographical area. So that is part of the fine print in the Act. But because the Act is not for a design, it's for a process and a place, the accurate GIs are those which define the process as it is now. Because to certify, you have to certify the current process, not something that was there 300 years back. So we need more understanding on it.
Katherine, I would most appreciate your speculations on what would be, I mean, if you could push things in a direction that seemed productive to you and that seemed well-grounded, what would that be for Bastar and brass casting?
Well, obviously, over 30 years, I've thought about that, and I've also done some earlier research in Orissa, and there were a number of craftspeople who would be invited to the Crafts Museum for the demonstration program, and talked about how impossible it was for them to leave because they had families, they had farm, they had agricultural land, and so then I thought, well, is one solution something that's more local, but then that just replicates the kind of craft demonstration end of it. And that was why initially I was thinking, well, Jaidev's Shilpigram, is this a useful model? But I think the problem was that Jaidev probably did become the middleman, right? Because so few of the craftspeople that were there, especially in Kondagaon, and the casters I've worked with in Barkai were also involved, but it was too difficult, and I think these other craftspeople, not Jaidev because he was a savvy businessman, but other craftspeople didn't have the wherewithal to really work with commissions without advances, so there's a whole chain of problematics in here that have to do with access to money, that the idea of Grameen Bank assisting with loans, something I cut out of the paper. The brass casters or craft people need to be able to make regular monthly contributions to these loans to maintain them, and often they weren't able to do that. There'd be
a particular part of this that I wonder about is that it seems like there are two kind of contradictory pressures that have been exerted on brass casters and lots of other low-ranking artists. One is to produce lots of stuff at low prices so you can sell it. So that's all the replication you were showing. And there's a pressure to do that for export markets so that you can sell cheap stuff in foreign countries that's cool looking. And the other is to become like artists, which seems to be the Baikal model. And is that like an unresolvable dialectic, or is there some way to intervene in the reception of these things?
Well, I think Jaidev is an example of someone who tried to navigate both the art and the craft worlds, and he was routinely criticized. Meera Mukherjee, his work is not art because of whatever, right? And I was talking with Mustaq Khan in Delhi 5 days ago, and he was talking about Bhupen being on a similar kind of trajectory now with these exhibitions, but he is somehow alienated from the other casters in the community, right? So I think the other issue that I was trying to raise is that there are all of these pressures on them. It's not just about selling, but the purchasing of the materials, right? And so this goes back to the issue around not being able to have access to sand. The brass casters used to be able to go and collect these materials in the forest. All of this has been taken over by the state, and not only that, casters are being driven off their land. There are these big projects, the steel plants coming up in Nagarnar and the Bailadila. So it would have to be, I think, a very multifaceted, multi-pronged program to really advance the status of the craftspeople.